Emily and Daniel had been feeling the quiet strain of their marriage for months, though neither admitted it aloud. Life had become a cycle of work, errands, and silent dinners, leaving a hollow space where laughter and closeness once lived. And on a Thursday evening, hoping to escape the suffocating routine of their small apartment in the city, they decided to take a drive into the countryside. A spontaneous plan meant to bring a spark back into their relationship, the air outside crisp with the first hint of spring, carrying the faint scent of wet grass and distant woods, and at first, they laughed over trivial stories and memories of early dates, but gradually their conversation turned reflective, each comment revealing unspoken fears and regrets, Emily noticing how Daniel sometimes drifted mid-sentence, lost in thought, and Daniel noticing the slight sadness in Emily's eyes that mirrored his own, both feeling a mixture of nostalgia, guilt, and longing, a quiet awareness of distance that had grown between them despite their love. And as the city lights faded behind them, the roads winding through open fields and occasional farms, the sky darkened unexpectedly, clouds rolling in thick and heavy, turning the world gray, and soon rain started to fall, soft at first, then hard, tapping on the windshield like urgent whispers, forcing Daniel to slow the car and squint against the downpour, the GPS signal flickering and disappearing, leaving them disoriented, unsure which way to go, tension building with every twist in the road as the storm grew fiercer, the wind howling and trees bending, making it clear that they were alone in a remote, unfamiliar place, and panic began to creep in, Emily gripping the steering wheel tightly, feeling her heartbeat rise with fear, Daniel scanning the horizon for any sign of shelter, their breaths visible in the cold air of the car, when suddenly, in the distance, a warm light appeared through the sheets of rain, a small house that seemed almost too perfect, inviting, as if placed there for them alone, and after a brief hesitation, Emily urged Daniel to stop, instinct telling her they had no choice, and Daniel reluctantly pulled onto the wet driveway, tires skidding slightly, the storm making everything feel surreal, like a scene from a storybook where they were the lost travelers searching for safety, and when they reached the door and knocked, it opened almost immediately to reveal Margaret, Daniel's mother. Smiling calmly, her presence like a sudden ray of sunlight cutting through the gray, her knitted shawl wrapped around her shoulders giving her an air of gentle authority and warmth, and Emily felt a flutter of surprise and relief, realizing her mother-in-law had arrived in this remote place seemingly by chance, yet somehow perfectly positioned to guide them through the chaos. Margaret ushered them inside with careful, deliberate movements, offering dry towels, blankets, and hot tea, her voice soothing, calm, and motherly, while the storm raged outside, lightning illuminating the room briefly, casting shadows that danced across the walls lined with family photos, warm lighting making the space feel like a sanctuary, and Emily couldn't help but notice how comforting Margaret's presence was, how naturally she created a safe bubble around them, her words soft but meaningful, giving them a sense of security and protection. And as Emily and Daniel sat down, shivering and exhausted, the tension between them began to loosen slightly, the anxiety from being lost and trapped by the storm replaced gradually by gratitude and quiet awe at Margaret's foresight and care, and in those first few moments, they were reminded of the fragility of life and relationships, the sudden way fear and love can intertwine, and how sometimes help comes in forms we least expect, a mother's instinct appearing at exactly the right time, a reminder that even when people feel lost, someone can show the way, provide warmth, and create a pause in the chaos of the world. And as the fire crackled faintly in the fireplace Margaret had lit, Emily glanced at Daniel, noticing his shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks, a small smile touching his lips, and she realized that although the storm outside was frightening, it had forced them to confront something deeper, the distance that had grown between them, the need for connection, and the quiet, unexpected interventions of people who care, and in that moment, despite the fear, the rain, the darkness, and the uncertainty, there was a glimmer of hope. A sense that maybe being lost was not the end, but the beginning of rediscovering each other, and all of this unfolded in a single evening where chance, nature, and a mother's intuition collided, leaving Emily and Daniel to sit together, drenched, cold, but slowly enveloped by warmth, security, and the gentle guidance of someone who understood how to hold them together when life threatened to pull them apart, setting the stage for what was to come, as the night promised more revelations. Emotional tension, and the fragile yet undeniable rekindling of love that had been quietly waiting, hidden beneath layers of routine and unspoken words, ready to emerge once they felt safe enough to embrace it again. Inside Margaret's cozy living room, the storm outside became a distant roar as Emily and Daniel sank into the warmth of the fire and the comfort of soft blankets, the tension from the drive slowly melting into quiet reflection, and almost immediately, Emily noticed how carefully Margaret moved around the room, offering tea, adjusting pillows, and creating a space where they could breathe without fear, a calm that felt almost magical after the chaos of the storm, while Daniel watched his mother with a mix of admiration and nostalgia, remembering how she had always been the anchor in their lives, the steady presence who could make difficult moments seem easier simply by existing in the right place at the right time. And as they sipped their tea, the first tentative conversation began, Emily speaking softly about the exhaustion of city life, the loneliness that sometimes crept into their relationship, and the subtle regrets she had been carrying silently, Daniel listening and nodding, realizing that he too had been holding back, afraid to admit how disconnected he had felt despite still loving her deeply, and Margaret, sensing the unspoken words between them, offered gentle comments. Not intrusive but guiding, sharing small stories from her own past about mistakes, missed chances, and the importance of patience and understanding, her voice calm, full of warmth, allowing Emily and Daniel to reflect on their own relationship without feeling judged, while the fire flickered, shadows dancing across the walls lined with family photos, old books, and keepsakes that whispered of a life filled with lessons and love, creating a safe cocoon around them. And slowly, the couple found themselves talking about small memories, moments of laughter, shared dreams, and the little details of life they had forgotten to notice in each other, Emily laughing at a story Daniel remembered from a forgotten trip, Daniel smiling at a comment Emily made about their first apartment, and each laugh, each smile, felt like a spark igniting a warmth that had been dormant, a reminder of why they had fallen in love in the first place. While Margaret quietly observed, her presence a gentle reassurance that sometimes love needs space, guidance, and a reminder of its own strength. And as the evening wore on, Emily noticed the softness in Daniel's gaze, the way he reached for her hand across the blanket, a tentative gesture at first, then firmer as if rediscovering a language they had almost lost, and Daniel noticed the way Emily's eyes lingered on him with a mixture of longing and vulnerability, emotions that words could barely capture, and for the first time in weeks, maybe months, there was no pretense, no walls, just the quiet reconnection of two hearts, remembering their rhythm, their closeness, and the subtle intimacy of shared presence, while Margaret, sensing that her role was that of a facilitator rather than an interloper, quietly excused herself for a moment, leaving them with the firelight, the sound of rain still drumming softly on the roof, and the security of being together. And in that small absence, Emily leaned closer to Daniel, her voice a whisper, sharing fears she had never dared speak aloud, the worries about growing apart, the frustration with themselves for letting time and routine create distance, and Daniel responded with equal honesty, admitting his own mistakes, the times he had drifted, and the moments he had wished to reach for her but had been unsure how, and as they spoke, the physical closeness grew, their hands entwined naturally, their shoulders brushing, their breaths aligning, a quiet, tender reconnection that had nothing to do with the storm or the cold outside, but everything to do with the emotional walls coming down, and as they held each other, Emily felt a wave of relief, a sense that perhaps the distance between them had not been unbridgeable, that love, when nurtured and remembered, could still flourish even after quiet neglect, while Daniel, feeling the warmth of her hand in his, realized that the storm, the fear, and even their being lost had led them here, to a moment of clarity, intimacy, and hope, and as they shared soft smiles and lingering glances, Margaret returned, carrying another tray of tea and snacks, her eyes twinkling knowingly, giving them no words of direction but a gentle presence that said enough, that love can find its way when given the right space, care, and attention. And as the night deepened, the storm outside finally softened to a drizzle, the rhythmic sound of rain becoming a comforting background rather than a threat, and Emily and Daniel continued to talk, laugh, and share small stories, each revelation bringing them closer, reminding them of dreams, plans, and moments of tenderness, the kind that is easy to overlook in the rush of daily life, but vital to the heartbeat of a relationship. And as they leaned back against the couch, exhausted but peaceful, they noticed how natural it felt to be together again, how little effort it seemed now to reconnect, as if the fire, the warmth, and Margaret's quiet guidance had allowed them to strip away months of worry and distraction, leaving only the essence of their bond. And while the night stretched on, filled with quiet laughter, reflective pauses, and gentle touches, a realization settled over both of them, that being lost, trapped, or in danger sometimes opens doors to discovery, to clarity, and to the rediscovery of love. And though they could not yet predict the challenges ahead, or how their lives would resume once the storm passed, they felt a fragile but undeniable hope, a renewed commitment to each other sparked by the small acts of care, the emotional honesty, and the gentle nudging of a mother-in-law who understood that sometimes the best way to guide love is to create a safe space for hearts to speak, connect, and remember. And as Emily rested her head against Daniel's shoulder, the room filled with the soft glow of the fire, the quiet sound of rain outside, and the comfort of being together again, they realized that Margaret had done more than provide shelter. She had reminded them of warmth, security, and the tender power of love, setting the stage for the healing, reflection, and romantic rediscovery that would continue in the coming days, leaving both of them with a sense that though the world outside could be harsh, unpredictable, and cold, within the walls of that small living room, guided by understanding, care, and intimacy, they could find the way back to each other, and maybe, just maybe, to themselves. The night grew deeper, the storm outside having softened to a gentle drizzle, leaving the world wet and quiet. And inside Margaret's cozy home, the fire continued to crackle, casting a warm glow across the room, and Emily felt an unexpected courage rise within her as she began to speak more openly, sharing thoughts she had held back for months, telling Daniel about the small lonelinesses that had grown between them, the tiny frustrations that had piled up, the longing for connection she hadn't known how to voice. And as she spoke, Daniel listened with rapt attention, realizing that he too had kept his feelings locked away, afraid that speaking them might push her further away. But now, seeing the vulnerability in her eyes, he found himself opening up as well, admitting the times he had grown distant, the moments when work or distraction had pulled him from her, the nights when he had wished to hold her closer but didn't know how. And their words began to build a bridge, shaky at first, but real, connecting the hearts that had wandered silently in different directions for too long. And Margaret, noticing this fragile reconnection, quietly moved to the kitchen, giving them space while leaving her presence subtly guiding them, her footsteps soft, her warm smile from the hallway a reminder that love sometimes needs only safety and quiet encouragement to bloom again. And as Emily and Daniel leaned toward each other, their hands brushed, fingers meeting, tentative at first, then stronger, holding tightly as if both were afraid to let go. And in that touch, months of distance, misunderstanding, and unspoken longing seemed to melt, leaving only the memory of why they had fallen in love, the chemistry between them unspoken but undeniable, the emotional tension that had lingered finally finding release in shared presence and soft laughter. And Daniel whispered memories of early dates, of nights when they had talked for hours, of dreams they had made together, and Emily responded with her own recollections, the moments that had made her heart flutter, the small gestures he had shown that had meant so much, the tenderness in his eyes that she had missed more than she realized. And together, Their voices mixed with soft laughter and occasional silence, each pause heavy with emotion, each glance full of recognition and rediscovery, while the fire flickered, shadows dancing across the walls, reflecting the complexity of feelings between them, and Emily, feeling safe in this cocoon of warmth, admitted fears she had carried about losing him, about growing apart, about the invisible walls they had built around themselves without realizing, and Daniel, holding her hand, responded with reassurance. A quiet promise to notice her more, to communicate, to be present in the way she had longed for, and as they spoke, the storm outside became a distant hum, no longer threatening, just background to their rediscovery, and the room seemed to hold them, a protective space where love could be remembered and rekindled, while Margaret, ever observant, quietly returned with a tray of snacks and tea, setting it down without interrupting the intimacy, her presence a silent blessing, allowing them to own the moment without intrusion. And the hours passed quickly, filled with soft confessions, tentative touches, shared smiles, and lingering eye contact that said more than words ever could, and Emily realized she had been holding back tears not from sadness but from relief, from the emotional release of finally being heard and understood, while Daniel felt a similar weight lift from his chest, the guilt, the worry, the tension of unspoken feelings replaced with warmth, hope, and a renewed desire to nurture their bond, and they began to plan, softly, for small ways to reconnect in the days ahead, simple things like walking together, talking honestly, and making time for shared moments that had once seemed trivial but now carried immense value, all while sitting close on the couch, their bodies naturally leaning into one another, their hands never letting go, the intimacy of proximity speaking volumes about love, forgiveness, and longing, and as they shared stories from their past, dreams for the future, and private jokes that resurfaced, Emily felt her heart expand with affection and tenderness, realizing that the spark had never truly left, only dimmed under the weight of routine, and Daniel felt the same, the fire between them reigniting not with passion alone but with understanding, commitment, and mutual respect. And as the night deepened, the conversation slowed into comfortable silence, broken only by soft laughter or whispered words, each moment carrying an emotional resonance that had been absent for months, and in that silence, hands still intertwined, they understood that love is not just about grand gestures but about presence, attention, and the courage to be vulnerable, and they looked at each other with new clarity, seeing not only the person before them but the journey they had shared, the mistakes, the lessons, and the deep bond that had weathered distance and doubt, while Margaret, standing by quietly, felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that her subtle guidance, her instinct to create a safe, nurturing environment, had allowed Emily and Daniel to confront their hearts honestly, and as the first hints of dawn began to creep through the curtains, painting the room in soft golden light, Emily and Daniel held each other close, realizing that the night, the storm, and the shelter provided had given them more than safety, it had given them a chance to reconnect, to forgive, and to begin the work of rebuilding trust and intimacy, their emotions raw yet comforting, their hearts aligned once more, and as they finally relaxed against each other, smiling softly, the understanding settled in. Love sometimes needs a push, a pause, or even the gentle intervention of someone who cares to remind you what matters, and this night, under the guidance of Margaret's quiet presence, they had not only survived being lost in the storm but had found the first steps back to each other, the fragile yet undeniable spark of romance and emotional closeness ready to grow into something stronger, deeper, and more enduring, leaving them with hope, tenderness, and a shared promise that the road ahead, though still uncertain, could be traveled together. Hearts aligned, hands held, and love remembered in its purest, gentlest form. Morning came softly after the long night, the storm gone and the world outside glistening with fresh rain, the sunlight filtering through the windows of Margaret's warm, cozy home, and Emily woke first, feeling the lingering warmth of Daniel beside her, the comfort of the night's confession still echoing in her heart, while Daniel stirred, rubbing his eyes and smiling at her in a way that felt familiar yet new, as if the storm had washed away months of distance and doubt, and Margaret, ever thoughtful, had prepared a simple breakfast of coffee, toast, and fruit, filling the kitchen with the smell of warmth and care, the air inviting them to linger, to sit together, and to continue the gentle rebuilding of connection that had begun the night before. And as they ate, their conversation flowed naturally, light at first, teasing and playful, then deeper, reflecting on their shared memories, the mistakes they had made, the ways they had unknowingly drifted apart, and the moments they had longed to reach for each other but hadn't, while Margaret moved quietly around, offering small gestures of help without interrupting, her presence a steady reassurance, a reminder that love often needs a safe space to grow and heal. And Emily noticed how much Daniel had changed in the short hours of the night, how his words carried intention, how his gaze lingered with tenderness, and how even his silences spoke volumes, while Daniel saw in Emily a softness, a renewed trust, and a vulnerability that invited closeness, reminding him of the woman he had fallen in love with and inspiring a desire to cherish her more fully. And as the meal ended, Margaret suggested gently that they take a moment to walk outside, to feel the freshness of the morning air, and they stepped onto the damp lawn together, hands brushing, shoulders close, the sky clear now, the world calm, the storm's chaos replaced by serenity. And in the quiet of the morning, they began to speak about their future, about small changes they could make to nurture their relationship, the daily acts of attention, the honest communication, the effort to notice and support each other. And Emily felt her heart swell with hope, realizing that reconnecting was not a single dramatic moment but a series of intentional steps, a continuous care, while Daniel nodded in agreement, silently promising to be more present, to listen more, and to let their love guide them rather than routine and distraction. And as they walked, Emily felt the lingering emotional warmth from the night before, the touch of Daniel's hand in hers, the quiet reassurance in his eyes, and she realized that Margaret had done more than provide shelter from a storm. She had created the conditions for them to find each other again, to remember intimacy, trust, and the quiet magic of being together. And Daniel felt a similar gratitude, knowing that the storm, the being lost, and the unexpected guidance of his mother had reminded him of the fragility and strength of love, the importance of presence, and the beauty of shared vulnerability. And as they returned to the house, Emily leaned on Daniel, their closeness natural and effortless, their hearts beating in unison, the atmosphere filled with a soft hope, a delicate but tangible sense that this moment marked a turning point, a bridge from distance to intimacy, from routine to awareness. And Margaret watched quietly from the kitchen, her eyes reflecting satisfaction, knowing that her subtle interventions, her care, and her gentle nudges had helped them remember not only each other but also themselves. And as they packed up to leave, the gratitude between them was palpable, Emily embracing Margaret tightly, whispering thanks for her guidance, for the warmth, the safety, and the emotional space she had provided, and Daniel following with a firm, respectful hug that conveyed love, appreciation, and recognition of the quiet wisdom that had shaped this night into a new beginning. And stepping into the fresh morning, the rain-scented air filling their lungs, they felt a sense of renewal, a clarity that being lost was sometimes necessary to find the right path, that challenges can create opportunities for rediscovery, and that love, when given attention, honesty, and patience, can weather storms both literal and emotional. And as they walked to their car, hands intertwined, smiles soft and genuine, hearts lighter, they reflected on the lessons of the night, that vulnerability is strength, that care from others can guide healing, that emotional honesty fosters closeness, and that sometimes, guidance comes from those who quietly understand what is needed, even if unspoken. And as the engine started, and they drove away from the countryside house, the road shimmering with residual rain, Emily and Daniel shared glances that spoke volumes, a silent promise to nurture their love, to continue the journey of reconnection, and to never take the other for granted again. While behind them, Margaret waved from the doorway, the warmth of her presence lingering in their hearts, a gentle reminder that love is strengthened not only by passion but by guidance, understanding, and moments of quiet care. and as the city skyline appeared in the distance, the morning light reflecting off wet streets, Emily and Daniel felt a mixture of gratitude, hope, and excitement, the emotional weight of the past months lifting, replaced by the knowledge that they had found each other again, that the bond between them was resilient, that forgiveness and attention could heal distance, and that, most importantly, being lost sometimes leads to finding the way back, and the memory of that night, the fire, the confessions, the gentle nudges of Margaret, and the quiet intimacy shared would remain with them forever, shaping not only their relationship but their understanding of love, care, and connection, leaving them with a newfound appreciation for each other, a deeper emotional closeness, and the quiet, unspoken knowledge that no matter how far they drifted, the right guidance, presence, and willingness to be vulnerable could always lead them home, together, safe, and warmly connected.